Hello friends, welcome back to another fairy tale video. Today's tale is a real treat for me because this is actually one of my favorite stories from when I was a kid, and I'm reading it out of my battered, beloved folklore treasury that I've had since, maybe before I was born? Forever anyway. I really need to rebind it. Maybe that'll be a future video. Bookbinding with Amber. Anyway, as you can see, today's tale is Anahit, which is a tale from Armenia. Sometimes the story crops up in English fairy tale collections, like mine, but it's not quite the household name like a Grimm's tale or a Charles Perrault tale like Cinderella. You might also have run across it because Rejected Princesses did a comic about it. I'll have a link to that in my description because they also have more info about the tale in general and like funky stuff like footnotes. I'm a nerd and I love footnotes. There's also an animated movie that you can watch for free on YouTube. I will also link it, but it's not subtitled, and it's all in Armenian, so good luck. Now, I myself do not speak Armenian, so if you do, I'm just gonna apologize for any bad pronunciations I have going into this tale, but I did my best. I looked some things up, and I tried. Anyway, without further ado, I present to you Anahit. One spring morning, Prince Vachigan of Armenia went hunting, and, in the course of the day, he came to the village of Atsik. Tired and footsore, he sat by a well to rest. While he was resting, a group of village girls came to the well, filling their pitchers with the pure spring water. One of the girls offered a drink to the handsome wayfarer, seeing that he was thirsty. But just as he was about to drink, another girl snatched the pitcher from him and emptied the water into a pail. Then she refilled the pitcher from the pail, only to pour it back into the pail again. This she did 6 or 7 times. In the meantime, Vachigan's throat had become parched. He was so eager for a drink, and the girl seemed to be teasing him. However, at last she handed him a little water in a pitcher. The prince greedily drank the water, then asked, "Why did you not give me water the first time? Why did you tease me when I was so thirsty?" "It is not our custom to tease a stranger," the girl replied. "You were tired and hot. The cold water would have harmed you. That is why I waited before letting you drink." The girl's reply surprised and pleased Vachigan as much as did her beauty. When he asked her name, she replied, "I am Anahit, daughter of Aran the shepherd. And you, stranger, who might you be?" The prince hesitated, at last saying, "I cannot tell you that, but I give my promise you will learn soon enough who I am and where I come from." So saying, the prince left her at the well. He returned directly to the palace and told his mother that he wished to marry the shepherd's wise and lovely daughter. His mother, the queen, would not hear of it. "My dear son," she said, "a prince should not wed a mere shepherdess. The Afghan king has 3 fair daughters. You may choose a bride from among them. The king of Georgia has 2 lovely daughters. Choose one as you wish. The prince of Gugar has 1 beautiful daughter. Should you marry her, you would be heir to all her father's lands. No less beautiful is the daughter of the prince of Sunik. All these princesses are worthy of you." But Vachigan would marry none but the humble Anahit. So stubborn was he, and so sad did he become, that in the end his parents dispatched Shivar, their son's faithful servant, to the village of Atsik. Aran the shepherd welcomed Shivar and spread a carpet before him. Upon this carpet the prince's envoy spread the royal gifts, silk robes and precious jewels. "Why is the king's son so gracious to me?" asked Anahit, when Shivar explained that the gifts were for her. "Vachigan, only son to our noble king, has met you one day at the well and fell in love with you," said Shivar. "I am here by the order of the king to ask you to wed the prince." "Then the hunter I met was indeed the prince?" Anahit mused. "He seemed a good man. What trade does he know?" "He is the king's son," said Shivar, surprised. "All the king's subjects are his servants. What need does a prince have of a trade?" "Who is master today may be a servant tomorrow," replied Anahit softly. "Everyone should have a trade, be he king, prince, or pauper." Shivar was surprised at her words, and not a little angry. "Then you will not wed the prince because he has no trade?" he asked. "That is so," the girl said. "Take back all your gifts and tell the prince to pardon me. I would not marry a man who has no trade." At the palace, the news was brought to the king and queen, who could scarcely conceal their relief. Surely, now their son would change his mind. But Vachigan simply said, "Anahit is quite right. I must learn a trade, like all people." Reluctantly, the king summoned a council of his nobles to select a suitable calling for his son. After much deliberation, They resolved that the weaving of brocade was the most fitting profession for a prince. A skilled craftsman was forthwith brought from Persia, and within a year Vachigan had learned the craft. Using fine gold thread, he wove a length of delicate brocade, and sent his faithful Shavar with it to Anahit. She received it graciously, and immediately gave consent to their marriage. Preparations for the wedding were at once begun, and the grand festivities lasted a full 7 days. The married pair were very happy. Soon after the wedding, however, a mystery occurred and clouded their lives for some time. Shavar, the prince's faithful friend and servant, disappeared without a trace. Though people searched high and low for him, not a sign of his whereabouts could be discovered. As the years rolled on, memory of him dimmed, and other events claimed attention. The king and queen both died in their declining years, and Vachigan became king. Never had the people been ruled so justly as by King Vachigan and his wise queen Anahit. One day, however, the lovely Anahit said to her husband, "I perceive, my dear Vachigan, that you know your subjects poorly. Your nobles do not tell you the entire truth. They would have you believe that all goes well at all times. Perchance that it is not so. Would it not be wise to go about your kingdom, now and then, in the guise of a merchant or a craftsman, and talk freely with your subjects?" "You are right, wise Anahit," said the king. "I knew my people better when I was a prince and hunted across the countryside. But who would rule while I'm away?" "I would," his wife replied. "No one need know that you are gone." So it was decided between them. King Vachigan dressed as a simple peasant and started out on his travels. There was much he learned to his advantage in seeing how the poor folk lived and in listening to the village gossip. Finally, one day he arrived at the town of Peroj. As he was resting in a market square, he noticed a crowd of people following a venerable priest. The old priest moved slowly. His way was first cleared with a brush, and stepping stones were placed beneath his feet. So pious was the priest that he would not even step on the ground for fear of crushing an ant or beetle. A rug was spread in the square for the priest to rest, and Vachigan pushed through the throng to gain a better view of him. Though aged, the priest still had sharp eyes, and saw at once that a stranger was in their midst. "Who are you?" he asked Vachigan, "and what is your trade?" "I am a weaver, just arrived from distant parts," the king explained to the old priest. "Good, then you shall come with me," said the other. "I'll pay you well, and treat you kindly." While they were conversing, other holy men had gone off in different directions, and shortly returned with bearers laden down with supplies of every sort. When the holy men were assembled, the chief priest rose and left the square. Obediently and with some curiosity, Vachigan followed them. When the procession came to the city gates, the priest turned to bless the crowd before it dispersed. Then the holy men, the bearers, and Vachigan continued on their way beyond the town. After some time, they arrived at a high stone wall in which there was a single door. The venerable priest unlocked it, and the procession passed through. A large square lay within. In the center stood a great temple built of red stone. The bearers set down their bundles as instructed, before being led, along with Vachigan, behind the temple to an iron door that led into a hillside cavern. "Go in, friends," said the priest. "You will find work within, and you will be rewarded as you deserve." They entered silently, each and every one. Behind them they heard the iron door swing to with a great clang, shutting out the light. Their only way now was forward, so they stumbled on down a tunnel until they reached a large cave. In the cave the air was rent continually by the most pitiful human groans and screams. The newcomers stared about them in growing horror as their gaze alighted upon what looked like human skeletons rotting away along the walls. A figure staggered towards them, resembling neither man nor beast. It had all the features of a corpse, with sunken eyes, a death's head, and a skeletal frame. It was a human being, all right, but in a sorry state. "Come with me," a hollow voice spoke from the emaciated frame, "and I will show you everything." The 12 men followed him down a narrow tunnel and came to a second cave filled with men writhing in their death throes. In a third cave stood enormous pots over great fires. Vachigan, bolder than his companions, bent over one pot and instantly turned away in horror, saying nothing to the others. They were then led along another stone tunnel where, in the dim half-light, they saw several hundred men toiling without cease, all of them as pitiful as the guide. Some were weaving, some sewing, some embroidering, some knitting. said the corpse-like guide. "That evil priest who led you here lured us to our doom in the same way. I do not know how many years I have spent here, for there is neither day nor night, just this eternal gloom. All I know is that my companions are long dead. If a man has a trade, he is taken and given work until he dies. If he has none, he is thrown into an iron pot and boiled alive, as you have seen." As the gaunt figure was speaking, his voice and features struck a faint chord in Vachigan's memory. Yes, it was none other than his old friend and servant Shavar, but Vachigan made no sign of recognition for fear of snapping the slender thread that bound his long-lost friend to life. When Shavar had moved away, Vachigan asked his companions what work they could do. One was a tailor, one a weaver, and the rest had no trade at all. Just then steps were heard coming down the tunnel, and a priest appeared, accompanied by armed guards. "You newcomers, which of you knows a trade?" asked the priest roughly. "We all do," Vachigan replied. "We work together, weaving precious brocade, which is 100 times more valuable than gold." The priest looked unconvinced, yet nonetheless ordered tools and materials to be brought for the men to prove themselves. "But should your boast be less than true," he warned, "I shall have you all skinned alive and boiled in oil." Vachigan set to work, instructing his helpers in their craft. In the passing of time, they had woven a most splendid brocade, embroidered with a message that told of all the horrors of the underground dungeon. But the message was hidden in the pattern, and could only be read and understood by those wise enough to interpret it. The priest was delighted with Vachigan's craftsmanship. "I told you that our brocade was 100 times more precious than gold," Vachigan told the priest. "In truth, it is worth more than that amount, for certain charms are woven into the pattern that cannot be understood by ordinary folk. Only the all-wise Queen Anahit will appreciate their meaning." The greedy priest was amazed, and made up his mind to sell the brocade himself, so that none should share in his profit. Without a word to the high priest, he took the brocade and set out alone for the palace of Queen Anahit. Meanwhile, Queen Anahit had ruled the country wisely, and no one suspected that the king was away. Nevertheless, as the days passed into weeks and even months, and still there was no sign of her husband's return, Anahit became alarmed. One morning she was informed of the arrival of a priest bearing precious wares. Once admitted to the queen's presence, he laid before her the length of magnificent brocade. Anahit gave it the briefest glance, without noticing the pattern. "What price are you asking?" she asked. "It is 300 times more valuable than gold, O queen," he answered. "It has special charms embroidered in the pattern." Anahit unfolded the brocade to take a closer look. On it she saw no charms, but letters woven into the pattern so artfully that they formed whole words. Anahit read the message in excitement. "My own dear Anahit, I am held captive in an underground cavern. The bearer of this brocade is my cruel guard. Shavar is with me. Send an army to rescue us. We are just east of Peroj in a hillside cavern that lies behind a temple enclosed by high walls. Without your help we shall all perish soon. Vachigan." Anahit at once gave an order for the surprised priest to be seized and locked up. Then her heralds rang out the alarm, summoning all the townsfolk to the palace. "Hear me, citizens," shouted Anahit. "The life of your king is in peril. Let all who love him follow me to rescue him. By midday we must reach the town of Peroj." Within the hour, all the men and women of the town were armed and mounted on their horses, eager to follow Anahit to rescue their king. They did not stop their gallop until they reached the market square in Peroj a little before midday. Once there, Anahit ordered the town governor to lead her army forthwith to the temple beyond the city walls. Thinking that more prisoners had been brought, the priests unlocked the iron door to let Anahit and her army in. Only then did they realize their mistake. The chief priest rushed forward with sword in hand, and would surely have struck down the bold Anahit had her horse not reared up and trampled him to death. The doors of the underground cavern were then flung open. A fearful sight met the people's gaze. Ghost-like apparitions crawled out of the hole. Some, at death's door, hobbled along on crutches, blinded by the daylight. The more recent arrivals staggered about drunkenly like crippled ants. The last to emerge were Vachigan and Shavar, the king supporting his friend, lest he fall. How happy Anahit and Vachigan were to see each other again, and how grateful was the faithful Shavar. He wept and pressed his lips to Queen Anahit's hand. "Our dear Queen Anahit," he cried, "today you have saved our lives." "Not so, my brother," Vachigan told him. "Anahit saved us long ago, the day she asked you if the king's son had a trade. Do you remember how you scorned her question? We owe our lives to her wisdom." Throughout the wide lands of Armenia, the tidings spread of King Vachigan's terrible adventure, and all gave praise to the king and his resourceful queen. The minstrels made up songs about them, and thus the story of Anahit's wisdom has come to us today. I just found this one so satisfying. Do you think so as well? I like that everything Anahit says is pretty sensible, not just everyone in the universe treating nonsense as sensible because the story says so. But you can apply this stuff to your life pretty easily. I never drink really cold beverages unless it's stupid hot out because they do kind of hurt my stomach, you know? Although, I'm a sucker for slushies on a really hot day. Maybe Anahit never had to cope with the temptation of slushies. As for the history of the story, apparently it was collected by the Armenian scholar Gazaros Agayan, who was born in 1840 and died in 1911, who wrote literature for children, and who was at one point arrested for being a member of a socialist party. I think you can see that socialist sensibility in the story, with Anahit insisting Vachigan get a job. Apparently this story was popular with the Soviets, because you can find Anahit in Soviet children's treasuries. I think it's the Soviet version that has the evil priest, or priests, because Soviets were not especially pro-religion. Although, as a kid, I understood the villain as a liar who was faking being a priest, so it really didn't make the priests, priests in general, seem particularly evil, but rather, people who lie and kidnap other people. In other versions, apparently the evil priests are a bandit or a group of bandits. There are differences in the various versions of the story that I found. In some, Vachigan has a beloved dog. Sometimes his servant is named Vaginak or Nazar, like in the Rejected Princesses version. In the one collected in the anthology Fearless Girls, Wise Women, and Beloved Sisters by Kathleen Regan, Vachigan's parents have their own names. And Anahit's stallion is described as being clever, which is kind of intriguing. I just like horses. Anyway, in general, the story has all the recognizable beats in all of these variations, and the names overall are pretty consistent. Anahit is usually Anahit, Vachigan is usually Vachigan, So I think that's pretty interesting that there is quite a high level of consistency in the plot. For an interesting side note, Anahit is also the name of an Armenian goddess of healing, wisdom, and water, and likely the same or similar to the Iranian goddess Anahita. Anaeet, the goddess's heyday, was around 5th century BCE, according to Wikipedia. So that's pretty neat. So about the art, I think I did this one way more justice than Molly Whoopie last month, and I spent considerably less time fighting with clouds. Actually, I had a lot of fun with the background in this one. I had to stop midway through the painting when I reached her face just to go in and pencil out the planes of her face and her features because I really needed to get better proportion and shape. I really struggle with faces, so I'm pretty happy with how this one ended up, even though her expression by the end is hella angry. I mean, I'd be extremely angry in her position. So if anyone out there is planning to kidnap my fiance, you are doomed. Just kidding. But please don't kidnap anybody. I did look up lots and lots of Armenian clothes for this, and I sort of made up the outfit following the basic shapes of Armenian traditional dress. Armenian women traditionally wore a lot of jewelry, partially to ward off evil spirits and bring luck, and more practically to our modern sensibilities, to keep wealth on hand if necessary, and signal wealth, which is kind of a universal use of clothing a lot of the time. The importance of weaving in this story makes a ton of sense because Armenians make gorgeous textiles. Stunning. Seriously, if you want a feast for your eyes, look up Armenian clothes and carpets and oh my gosh, my heart. And since I love drawing clothes, I painted her outer garment over her armor with a glimpse of the lamellar underneath. It's very self-indulgent of me. I mean, I don't know that anyone would be actually going into battle with that much fabric, but it looks pretty, right? So yeah, in general, I'm really happy with this one. I think I did a better job with values because I went in and mapped them out from the beginning. I think more of the stuff I learned from the schoolism class with Craig Mullins that I took, or audited a couple months ago, actually showed up this time, especially with regard to values and trying to keep a cohesive color scheme. You can't really see it on screen, but I'm sampling colors from an entirely different painting just to keep the scheme consistent, and I'm mixing it up too. The painting I was borrowing the color palette from didn't have any bright purples or anything, so yeah. That's Anahit. I hope you enjoyed the tale and the fairy tale. If you're enjoying this combo of painting and story, or you just like my work, or because you can, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss a video. And if you'd like a print of this piece, you can find prints at my Society 6 store, link below. Thanks so much, and make good choices out there, friends. Bye!